Well, welcome everyone. We are here at our fifth JED Talks. And as you probably have figured out, if you've been to a few of these, JED Talks is based on the ever well-known TED Talks, only for us it means Jesus encourages dialogue. And the tagline is, this is a place where we can listen and learn and love, even when we disagree. So it's a part of growing in our understanding. And so we've had some great presenters, and tonight promises to be another great evening. And so briefly welcome to Jim, who will be speaking, and Jason, my partner here on JED Talks. I'll turn it over to Jason now, and he can introduce both the evening and the speaker.
Wonderful. Thanks, Norm. Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to go through this Zoom rather quickly. There on the bottom of your screen there, you'll have a Q&A button. If at any point during Jim's talk that you have a question or anything along those lines, just hit that Q&A button and you can put your question in there. And the nice part is if you don't want to actually include your name in that, you can just click an anonymous button and that question will show up anonymously. So that's one way to submit some of those questions that you have. The other is this chat box that we have here. One of the things you're going to want to make sure that you do is under that 2 there's a little blue button. You're going to want to switch that to everyone or panelists and attendees. And just to test this out today, let's see, what should our question be today? What is your favorite summertime activity? So take a minute, put it in the chat there so that we know that it's working. Make sure that you switch that to everyone so that we can see that. And what's your favorite summertime activity? Oh, camping. Yes, 100%.
I guess I better say camping too.
Yeah, that's always good for the marriage. And now that they've announced that camping is looking like it's going to be a go for this summer, that is wonderful. Kayaking, farming, going to the beach, napping in the shade, traveling.
I like that one.
These are all the things I want to do right now. So just a reminder of the guidelines that we work with for our JED Talks. The first is really just around respecting others' opinions, and that all of us come with our own, just our own way of seeing the world. And so, just making sure that we're respecting others' opinions around that. Around listening to learn is this our second one. And what does it look like for us to really just listen to better understand or to learn something new? And I find that's just such a different way of our day-to-day listening. The last one is just really around engaging in a spirit of curiosity. And like we've talked about before, we have this mindset of judgment and this mindset of curiosity. And one of the things we know from neuroscience is we can actually operate in both at the same time. And so often we need to make this conscious choice around, are we going to come at this from a place of judgment, or are we going to come at this from a place of curiosity? And so tonight our invitation to you is to engage in that spirit of curiosity, to really get curious around what it is that Jim is saying. Again, if you do have any questions, feel free to type that in the chat there or to put that in that Q&A session. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Jim this evening. I'm going to let Jim actually introduce himself, but before I do, I met Jim a few years ago at a mediation training and was just really impressed with the way that Jim just showed up in this world. He's a funny, smart, and just all-around great guy, and I'm really excited to be here to learn from you, Jim, and to really just dive into this topic around peace building and a good mind. And so without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Jim.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate the accolades, and we did click in there. You meet different people at different times in your life. You're like, that guy right there, we're something, right? And here we are today. So I'm pleased that our friendships come to fruition here. Anyways, so this is good. So I'll introduce myself. My name's Jim Doxtdator. I'm an accredited family mediator, a child protection mediator. I do restorative practices. I'm a Reiki practitioner and a farmer. So I'm Wolf Clan, Cayuga Nation, Haudenosaunee, Six Nations. When we introduce ourselves, we make sure we say our clan. Our clan comes from our mother. Our mother, the matrilineal root to us, they have been wolves since the beginning of time. So we follow that all the way through. So I identify myself, and my clan is a wolf. I'm from the Cayuga Nation, and that's again through my mother and my grandmother and my great grandmother all the way down. And being Haudenosaunee from Six Nations, we've been Haudenosaunee for a long, long time, since time immemorial, they say. So I want to thank everybody for welcoming me here to your JED Talk. So as a Haudenosaunee, each morning, before we set out for our day, we give thanks. We give thanks to help us come to a good mind. This is our goal in the day. And oops, I'm having trouble with my slides there. Okay. So our traditional cultures have many ways of disputes resolving using a good mind. This means that instead of coercive force to get people to abide by social expectations, people would use the power of their minds to determine what justice would be without the use of violence, revenge, or physical force. Let's be thankful and put our minds together for the Thanksgiving address. So I'm going to read the Thanksgiving address and talk about it in English so that you can hear it and we can share it together and come to one mind, and that's the term we use about it. So let's acknowledge the people. There are brothers and our sisters that I'm sorry. Lost my spot. So we're gonna, just give me a second to click myself. So acknowledging the people, our brothers and sisters. Let's acknowledge the earth, our mother, the source of everything we need. Let's acknowledge the waters. The waters teach us that we can have great strength to transform even the tallest mountains while being soft, pliable, and flexible. We're thankful for the plants, animals, birds, bushes, trees, doing their original instruction. We're thankful for our elder brother, the sun. We're thankful for the grandmother, the moon. We give thanks to the stars as well as the unseen spiritual forces. There are a multitude of connections between human beings and other living beings in the world. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one, as we give greeting and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. So that's our Thanksgiving address. And sometimes it can go really, really long, right? Because inside of that Thanksgiving address, and you think about when I did glaze over, thanks for the bushes and the birds. I've seen speakers there before where they stood up and they named every single bird, right? They named every single tree. They named every single seed that we had for planting. So this traditionally goes on inside of our longhouse during a time we call Midwinters. Midwinters are a time, right, just as they indicate, in the middle of winter time. It's a time when we don't know if anything, we don't know if tomorrow will come because it's so dark and so desolate. So we gather to give thanks. And we gather to renew that commitment we have to each other, having that good mind. And we stir the ashes. We stir the ashes in the longhouse. And that in itself will renew from last year's ashes and turning that over so that we can see a new future. And what that means is when you imagine 100, 200 people in a longhouse stirring ashes, the air is filled with it. And you can see your ancestors there with you, right beside you, as thin beside you as a leaf. So we use that as our basis for the most important ceremony of all for us, and that's the Midwinters. So the good mind. This approach is founded on some core beliefs. All humans are sacred beings. We treat one another as if they are members of the same family, brothers and sisters. Our minds are given the gift of rationality that allows us to contemplate matters without being clouded by jealousy, anger, prejudicial thinking. A good mind allows us to be united in our thinking and build strong relationships and empower everyone to do good things. Everyone's voice matters, as we are to listen carefully to what is being said, refrain from our minds to tear apart the words of others. Instead, we are to have empathy with the speaker and respect them enough so as to clearly understand what they are saying. We're not supposed to bring personal desire into the decision making. Instead, we are to think what is good to be involved for everyone, what's good for everyone involved. In fact, we are supposed to be thoughtful at all times, thinking how and what we do today might impact the future generations. And we look ahead and back 7 generations for guidance, and we look ahead 7 generations to determine what our next moves are going to be. This is the consideration that our ancestors give us. We're going to give the children for the faces to come, as they say in the language. It's the Creator's intent that we live well, safe, free from fear, anger, trauma, and depression. The human mind can falter from time to time. It is the responsibility of others to try to unburden the troubled mind of the afflicted individual, to uplift their spirit so that they can fully function as intended by creation. Our creation story and the original instructions can be seen as an indigenous whole health plan in which customary practices are the mechanism by which intended healthiness is maintained. So when we're gathered around, we notice if your head is down. We notice if you are not feeling well, and it's our duty. It's our duty to come to help you and uplift your spirit, uplift your mind, and that's the basis of our good mind. So we get into this, and I wanted to share this tonight with you. And this is a chakras. So chakras are energy that sit inside of us, that protect us, that keep us well. And as a Reiki practitioner, one thing I practice, often when people come to me, they're in a bad way. They've suffered a loss. They've, they're having trouble. Maybe they're having mental health issues, and clearly they're not in a good way, and they're looking for some guidance, for some help. So I start with them, and we start at the crown chakra. And the crown chakra, for explanation, is the light above our head, and that's the light given to us by our Creator. We call him Songondiso, right? Other people call him by different names. We believe he's the same person widespread. So this everlasting light is given to you when you're born. You're born, and we've all seen a new baby born. And when you see a new baby, you can't help but notice the glow on that baby. And that's the protection they've just come from the sky world. Their spirits come here. And Songondiso, God, Creator, has protected them and shown us how beautiful they are, right? And that's for us to reminder of how well to take care of that little one. But let's face it, we know that things do go wrong in life, and that baby doesn't get taken care of like a baby. They grow up and become adults like the majority of us here. And that light goes out, right? The light goes out, and people will start believing that they are the greatest force, right? They don't rely on the force above them to protect them. The ego takes over is what happens, and the trouble starts. The next one down is the third eye chakra. So the third eye right in here is something that helps us look into the future, right? So when we look into the future, any of us can do it. All of us have the ability to do it, right? We have to look into the future without fear, without all the things that we talked about in the good mind of having this jealousy or this negative thinking. We have to look at the future with this positive outlook about what could happen. And we do that through our third eye. We envision it, we imagine it, and sometimes you can manifest what it is that you're looking for in your life by simply imagining it up ahead of you and taking that path and step by step to get to the place you want. But of course, what happens is that third eye gets shut off. And how it gets shut off, and I don't know if anybody else remembers as a little kid, and children are especially able to see into the future, right? They're especially able to. And what happens is little kids will say, Daddy, I think this is going to happen. Or Mommy, I think this is going to happen. And they go, shush, shh, be quiet. Little tap. And all it tells the kid is, nope, let's turn that off. That's not, I'll just keep that to myself. And the third eye isn't something that can be turned on and turned off and turned on. It's something that once you reach that place where you can see, you foster it, you take care of it, you be careful, you've learned who you tell, right? So there's ways now different from when you're younger to protect that third eye. The next is the throat chakra. The throat chakra, that gives us our ability to speak. Speak clearly, speak loudly, enthusiastic, whatever emotion that's needed comes from this place right here where we voice it. That voice gets taken away from people. That voice gets taken away from people the moment trauma happens and nobody does anything about it. They sit silent. They go silent. We know these folks that walk amongst us, sometimes they can barely speak. They can barely say the words. That throat chakra is so clogged up that there's actually fear at speaking up and saying what they need to say. So we help them clear that, right? We help them clear that so they can speak their truth, right? The truth, your truth is the most important thing ever. That's your truth. You have to live it, you have to know it, and you have to own it. It's yours. The next one down is the heart chakra. Now the heart chakra, if you imagine sitting right in the middle of your chest, the heart chakra is the place where we rest into. So when we're, say, a little bit overexcited, we want to calm ourselves down, we connect with our heart center, we can tap on our hand, and we get out of our head into our body. We get out of our head, and I call this is my own coined phrase, but in our head, something happens. It's called the itty bitty shitty committee. It will talk you out of anything and everything and all things. It will. So we have to be careful of that, right? And we want to be down in our heart center so we can make those decisions and know that that is the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do for not just for me, for my loved ones, for the people around me, for the people that care about me. We have a lot of responsibility that sits in our heart center. What happens is over time is that heart center becomes blackened on one side. And it becomes blackened because people experience an overabundance of grief, an overabundance. And going back to my own community of Six Nations, if I look back in the last 10 years, there is probably at least 5 times in that last year, once a year maybe, that upwards of 20 to 30 people died in a cluster from my own personal family. And I went to all those funerals. You go to the funerals, you see your cousins, and you see them time and time again, and something's happening time and time again. They're just going lower and lower and lower and lower to the point where you're talking about them, we're talking to them, and they're not even paying attention. They're not giving energy to the person that's passed, because quite simply, they're tired. They're tired, and they don't know what to do with it anymore. No one has helped them with their grief. No one has taught them how to deal with their grief. It really is a shame, and people struggle and they hurt. So what we do is we help them heal that heart, and how we help them heal that heart is simply we trauma regression. We talk about the worst of times, you in it. We make a new decision about that moment, and we come forward and we chart a new path. And in that new path, we affirm that we will leave our heart center open. The people deserve our love. And I've seen transformations happen in those moments that people realize their own power and realize that darkness that laid upon them doesn't belong to them. They can simply move it aside and carry forward. Next down is our solar plex, or if you're sternum. And the sternum it kind of has an interesting function. And what the function is this. Should I go? I don't know. Maybe I should. Is contemplation. We contemplate at our sternum, right here. You think, well, I don't know, and we think about it. We think about it. We might think for a long time. You might get a decision right away and go, but that is where we do our thinking, right there. We weigh it. We can feel it in our body, and often we don't come up with a decision. And there's often things that are bad, and they just go down into our stomach. We look at that sacral chakra down in our stomach. And what that holds for us is one thing it holds is called cold anger. Cold anger is anger for something that has happened in your life that you couldn't do anything about. No one spoke of it. No one did anything about it. And it just sits in your stomach. It's cold. It's heavy. It's not, you feel that you can't do anything about it. It brings depression, right? It'll bring sickness. It'll bring, unwellness, all of it. It changes moods on people because when your stomach is off, you're off. And that relationship is hard for people to understand sometimes because it seems like such a punishment that we have identified that the things that somebody else did to you sit in your body, in your stomach, and it's now your responsibility to move those out. And I sit with them in that because it isn't fair, but they do have to do the work. And finally, the root chakra. The root chakra only has one purpose, and the one purpose of it is to hold you up. It's your last flame. It's your last light. It's your last ball of flame inside of you. And, for a lot of people, it's where your fire sits. It gives you your drive. It gives you your, I want to go. I want to do this. But for others, that when they have all those chakras failing on top of it, it feels like the final march every day. It feels like the final march that I don't know why I want to go on. And, and in a past life, I've worked in the criminal justice system as a bail supervisor. And often I get clients in and I'm looking at them. I can tell that last light is the only thing going on you. That's it. You've given up. You've said, do your worst to me, and we see these folks in our society all the time. So this leads us to, the healing path. We get on this, we find these things out about ourselves. And for me personally, I found myself in a position probably 15 years ago. I was 35 years old. I'd been just freshly divorced and I was having a really hard time with it, and we were fighting and carrying, everything was going on. We ended up in Children's Aid Society for the conflict, and there was no solution to it. They just couldn't figure out what was going on with us too. So they called in somebody to help mediate it out, to find out what it was. And an elder showed up and was talking to me and asked me about what had happened in my life, what had gone on in my life, right? And I shared with him that, I grew up in chaos. I grew up in turmoil. I'm the first person in 5 generations not to be in residential school. Everybody was in residential school. I was born in 1971. That school was closed 18 months before I was born. If I was born when it was open, I don't know that we would be having this conversation today, just because of the detrimental effects that place has had on my whole family. My mother had 9 brothers and sisters. My dad had 9 brothers and sisters. This system created chaos, and it created such uneasiness that you just start living in it and thought that this is just the way it was. Well, as life progresses, you see that you can't use aggression. You can't use your anger. You can't use these things to maneuver around. This is what the elder had brought to my attention. And what he had said was that the road to that place is a healing path, is giving up all those past conflicts, all those past hard feelings, doing something with them, right? Going back in time, looking at them again, making a new decision and carrying forward. And I took up that path. I took it up. I went to a healing lodge where they helped me regress not just the trauma that had happened in my 35 years of living, but they took me back 7 generations in order that I could see what my original intent was, with my original instructions. So when we're born, we believe that Songo Ndiso, our creator, puts his original instructions onto us about what we're supposed to be doing here while we're here on Earth. And what I saw, and I spoke to my ancestors about this, was my job was to be a peacemaker and a farmer. 2 things that I was not doing. And prior to that, I was in engineering and politics. And just as a caveat, if you ever want to meet the worst people you've ever met in your life, go to an engineering office or go sit around with politicians. It brings out the worst in you, right? So all of a sudden now, the world wants me to be a peacemaker, a peace builder. I had to learn. I had to learn to do that. So I just have, you go to the healing lodge, you do your work, you get out, you're a new person, you have new intent. And the poster on the right, that's from some years ago. I still had some black hair. That was a poster from my community in Six Nations where they were trying to drum up some kind of path for people to follow, something for people to look to that we could solve our problems within and chart a new course. So I volunteered for it, and my statement was, I'm a proud Haudenosaunee, therefore I will build peace in my family and community. And I have done that. I've continually do that, and that is my commitment. And until the day I die, that is what I do. And that leaves me at ease. And I look at that word at ease, because before I was at dis-ease. And there's the difference in the lives are astronomical. So once we're looking at this and we're saying, okay, come to your good mind, live this good life. And we're talking to everyone, right? You should know this. Everyone comes for these kind of treatments, this kind of idea. I say everyone from all walks of life, because if something I've said really draws you in to say, wow, I could use that help, right? We offer that help. People in my community are some of the kindest people I have ever met in my whole entire life. They help me at a really low point in my life, but treated me like an equal and have risen me up in order that I become a mediator, I become a restorative practitioner, I become a child protection mediator. This is all from the support of the people that help me heal. So my debt to them is just to pay it forward, is to help people understand it. So when we get down into the relationships and people have a hard time with relationships, we use this example of the 2-row wampum agreement. So this belt symbolizes the agreement and conditions under which the Haudenosaunee welcomed the newcomers. And I'll point out that in the middle 1400, maybe 1450 or 1400, maybe around 1450, around there, it was the Dutch settlers that had come to Upper New York State that we had went over a hill. Someone said, "Who's that?" And they sent somebody over. I ran over and I see Jason and I said, "Scano Ge" is what I said to him, right? And he didn't know what I said. And somehow he communicated back with me, and we came to a place where we're like, we want no problems with anybody. We just want to be here. And we understood that, and eventually came up with a wampum to signify the agreement. So you see the beads on the belt. Every single bead tells a story. And that story has been passed down since the day it was made. That belt sits at the Onondaga Longhouse in Six Nations. And there's people that will tell you the story. They renew that every single year where they tell that story there. And, there's a lot in depth to it. There's a recognition of the persecution that you experienced there. There's a recognition that you were struggling on the land, but we helped you on these particular things. And that helped you succeed. The folks in that colony would have known it the exact same way. And the renewal every single year that went on helped keep that relationship solid. And one physical thing that would happen would be that every year we would exchange a basket of our best goods. So you put your basket in front of me and I put my basket in front of you, and we would talk about it. We talk about if you're having trouble growing your corn. We talk about if you're having trouble collecting your berries or you can't preserve them or something's happened. And instead of criticizing, we would look to restore that to make sure that you knew and everybody knew collectively. Because we are big on that about now we all know at once, right? And things we all know at once, we all know. That's a universal thing, I believe, that people really stand on. And, so for us, we're looking at that from the newcomers and saying, okay, how's this relationship going to be? And, off the bat, it says, you say, you are our father and I'm your son. We say we're not like father and son, but like brothers. And that solidifies the relationship that we have. And it evens it out. Because if we come in like fathers and sons, there's an inherent up, right? And we want equal. We always want equal. We don't want to be your father and not you to be the son. We want to be brothers. So with all that said, I'm going to quote my mentor, Dr. Rick Hill. And what he's saying here is, in order to reach peace amongst us, right? We need to wipe our tears from the stains of the past so that we may see each other as equals once and for all. Now, and I'll follow those words up with a few of my own. And from my own experience as a mediator out there in the world, I listen to problems at schools, I listen to problems in the courts, I listen to problems in workplaces, I listen to problems in the community, right? And there's common amongst them all. And what the common is the trauma. It's the trauma that people are acting out of and being in. And what it really, for me, it tells me is that there is no active way for people to tap into that. That isn't the way dominant society sets it up. They don't encourage you to tell me everything about the past. They only want to hear, well, let's figure this out and maybe you take this drug or you do this to feel better. The whole health plan includes going back, coming forward. But going back, I would encourage anybody to look that if you were an immigrant or your parents or your grandparents, wherever it was, to look at what happened to them there. What happened to them when they came here? How were they treated? What effect did it have on them all? And what effect does it have on you today? Because that trauma needs to be regressed. And once we all do that, we all come to this place where it's not hard to see each other as equals. Doxtdator, thank you.
So I want to start by asking the very first basic question is, what is the best word to describe someone who is from the First Nations? So I don't want to use offensive language, and so
It's okay. It's a good question, and it's valid. It is valid because what's happened over time is the public we've been known as Indians, right? So everyone knew us as Indians for a long time, and we're saying, oh no, right? We're not Indians. We're Indians or from India. We're indigenous, right? But indigenous doesn't speak to what do you call me, right? Because no, I don't want you to say, hey, indigenous Jim. Like, who are you talking about, right? So we've gone from Indian to Aboriginal, right? To indigenous, which is the blanket term if you're talking about us all, right? The indigenous folks of Canada, right? But as it breaks down, the indigenous folks of Canada have names, right? You start from the east and you have Mi'kmaq, right? You have Algonquins, coming across, the Ottawa Valley. Down in where we are, we're Haudenosaunee, right? Our territory covers from the eastern shores of New York State all the way to Wisconsin, right? So it's a vast area, and then north up into where the Muskokas are, where we share territory with the Anishinaabe, right? So the Anishinaabe are the folks that just they live up and around Ontario. They butt up to us. We coexist, and in a treaty we call a dish with one spoon. So there is a belt, and there is a bowl, and there is a spoon. And what that tells us is that treaty tells us that we share this land. We're both have to eat out of this bowl, so don't eat it all and leave some for the rest of us. So that's our agreement amongst us. And as we move across the country, you have Cree, Oja Cree, Samson Cree, and out west and to the Vancouver coast, we all have names, right? So for us as Haudenosaunee, we take a little more offense by hearing First Nation than say some of the other First Nations. And for this reason, that our relationship with the Crown is different than theirs. Their relationship with the Crown is one of treaty, right? They sign treaties, they agree to a treaty area, treaty compensation, and they live, that's the way they lived. Our relationship with the Crown is that we're allies of the Crown, right? We fought with them in the War of 1812. They owe us to the victory of Queenston Heights, which stopped ultimately the Americans from coming over. We stopped that American battalion of 2,000 people with 100 Mohawk warriors screaming through the woods. And those Americans, they said, they're not going to do this again. That was it. And they left. They swore there was 1,000 of us or 10,000. There was 100, right? And we knew how to do it. We became allies, and that relationship has been soured over time, right? But we don't say we're a First Nation. We point over to the other ones and say they're a First Nation, but we're not. So there's a bit of a relationship that goes on, and that and then again, as Haudenosaunee, we look at it in our privilege, going, this is our territory. We know we fought for it, and this is where we stand. And it's a good question. And it really, just to further it, really just speaks to wherever you live around, whoever lives around you, right? That community that lives around you somewhere, find out who they are. Go to their website, find out if they're Anishinaabe, find out if they're Cree, find out if they're this or that. And just find out about them, right? Learn about them, read about them. And we're friendly people. We really want people to just accept us, and this is our life, and this is how we are. So I would encourage you to make relationship further with your neighbors.
Well, and the reason I was going where I was thinking with that question is it's probably not, or maybe I don't know how much in common do the different groups share, let's say, in terms of their religious viewpoint.
Yep.
So their understanding of the creator or creation or the thankful prayer and the good mind. Is that something that's uniquely Haudenosaunee, or is that something that's across the whole range?
So the words that I use are uniquely Haudenosaunee, right? But if I step over to my Ojibwe brothers, right? They use words like the good road. That's the word they use. They do the same teachings as the good mind, but they just talk about a good road. And that's, so we have a lot of similarities, right? Our creation stories are different, right? Slightly different. We have a creation story that sees the sky woman come down, land on the back of Turtle Island, which is North America, and it develops out into the big, huge landmass that it is. And the only thing she brought with her were corn, beans, and squash. And it remains something to this day that it's like the chicken or the egg. How did it get here? Because it needs to be planted by us to grow. So where did it come from? And that's the question. So we look at it like she brought it down with her, landed on Turtle Island, and things grew, and we celebrated around that. And so yeah, there's our creation story, and then the Anishinaabe, they have a little boy that fell through a hole, and he's their seer. He's the one that sees the development of the Turtle Island, where our home is.
One of your comments at the end there, Jim, just really struck me around the generational trauma, and was really just wondering, how does that manifest itself in us today, and like yeah, how does that generational trauma really impact us in our day-to-day lives and all the things that we're going through?
I'll report on all these different places. So I work in schools doing restorative practices, right? So I see conflict in school. I work in the courts. I see conflict with between couples, right? I've worked in the criminal justice system. I see what people have done to each other. I've worked in workplaces, and I see what happens in workplaces or conflicts. And one thing across the board I can tell you is that if an individual is feeling the least bit threatened, and that not even by violence or anything, just by words or something, they'll act out, right? And when we get called in saying there's been a conflict, and I catch up with Norm and I say, Norm, what happened, right? And I come to Jason, I say, what happened? And it was Norm that said it or did it. Ultimately, we're going to land on something with Norm that either he believes something, right? Or he's been told something that's not true, and he's acting upon it, right? This is what we call about bringing people back to community, right? So we want to bring you back. We don't want to punish Norm. We don't want to like say, well, all right, well, you've ruined this, Norm. You're out you go. We'll never want to see you again. Because the question lies, where does Norm go, right? We need to keep Norm here so that we can fix that behavior and help him have a good mind, right? So the trauma out in the world manifests inside of organizations and people like lateral violence, right? Lateral violence is huge. Lateral violence is when I go whisper into Jason's ear that I think Norm is doing something untoward, right? I don't have any proof. I don't really know, but it will set something off because he'll come around and talk to some other people, go, you better watch Norm. And Norm's going to be sitting there going, well, what's going on here? I've done nothing, but I have made sure that everybody thinks this of Norm. And while you're doing that, I'm over here doing something else, right? And, you know, inside the court system, you know, I run this program for the John Howard Society on Wednesday nights. It's called Intimate Partner Violence. And it is either men or women, 2 courses for both, that have been caught doing violence on their intimate partner, and it's their first time being caught. So if we have 10 people in that class, 8 of them have thrown a coffee mug or a cell phone or something, or a remote. Those are the big 3. And if you throw that remote and you hit the wall beside Norm, 5 feet beside Norm, Norm could call the police and say, I've been assaulted. And the police will come there and they'll see the mark on the wall, they'll see the remote in the ground, and they'll see you slightly agitated. You're going to jail right now. Then they let them divert that charge. So when they come into the class, basically what we teach them about is relationships. What are they, right? And we use a restorative approach, and where we're heading towards with them is saying that marriage is about personal growth and healing. That's what it's about, right? People can say it's about a lot of other things, but for me, it boils down to that. Because if you can share with your partner your most intimate things that are going on with you that you're working on, and they can share with you, that's real connection right there, right? That's real. And it's only between you, right? You know, you can tell your partner that this bad thing happened to me as a child. I'm working through this, and I'm going to rely on you, and you should know this about me, right? That's maybe the safest place in the whole world you can be, right? But it's when we're suffering our trauma and the other person's right beside us, they have no idea what's going on over here, is where real danger sits, right? And that danger goes to work. That danger goes to the community hall. That danger goes to baseball. That, you know, all these places, that's where the dangerous person goes. So that's why when we catch them doing these things, we really want to help bring them to their good mind, because I don't want you doing the same thing elsewhere, right? So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It really is. It's a lack of knowledge. People have grown up in trauma unchecked. They had domestic violence that no one talked about, and today you run into a wall. You're against a wall, and it needs to be dealt with.
One of the questions has to do with your community's traditions or culture. How are they preserved in your community? Is there a formal process, or is it just by word of mouth? How does that happen in your community?
So in our community, what we have on the traditional side of things right? Because we do have a big portion of the population that are Christian, right? We have Baptist church there, we have Anglican churches. There's a big, so other population that are traditional. I count myself in that, where you know, during the year, right, we have a series, 13 moons of ceremony, right, celebrating everything from corn, you know, in the small green corn, large green corn. We have a celebration for the wild strawberry. We believe that the wild strawberry, not the strawberry in the patch, the wild strawberry, the day comes when we can't find that strawberry is when the world's going to end. So you'll see, if you have many Haudenosaunee people on your Facebook or around, we find that strawberry and it's like the best thing we've ever seen. We just elated by it, right? Because it's telling us, and that strawberry is medicine for us, right? Come springtime, when people are generally sick, we make strawberry juice for you, and there's enough vitamin C and antioxidants in that to help set you right. So we look at these things, they're carried on a schedule, right? Inside of the longhouse, who's responsible for that are a bunch of people. So obviously you have the chief, right? So he is the chief of that nation and clan, right? So in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, there's 50 chiefs all the way around. There's one chief that is our head one, and we call him Tatadaho, right? So there's been one Tatadaho, right? Tatadaho is the original peacemaker, right? So the tradition of the Tatadaho, and he's the one we brought to the good mind. The clan mothers brought him to a good mind, and in his visioning, saw the intent of what was supposed to go on with the Confederacy, and they formed up the Confederacy from that person. And what they said to him is that we want you to lead us in perpetuity, forever. Because so what we always pick, because he dies, you know, it's been a lot of years, so the Tatadaho will pass away. And what they're looking for is that person amongst us that at one point in time was the worst and has come to their good mind, because the information and what they know is valuable, right? And we draw from that value. And they're also the deciding vote, if there is a vote in the Confederacy. So that's one person, that's one, the chief. But then below there, not below there, pardon me, beside there is the clan mother, right? So clan mothers inside the longhouse pick the chief. They pick who's going to be chief. So they identify, they see Jason's been working really hard at the ceremonies and the language, and they present him. What they say to him is this, that they're going to hold him up in front of everybody and put horns on him, right? So we have our head bonnets with our feathers on it. If you're a chief, you get two deer horns to go on. And that's how we know who the chief is, right? He's got the horns. The clan mother has the power to put him in, also got the power to bring him out, right? So it's her responsibility to watch him, to guide him, and to give him all that he needs to do his job, right? So that's her job. Then we have faith keepers, right? So the faith keeper's job is to remember the ceremonies, to remember the words, right? We have speakers. People's duty is to remember speeches. They're ancient. They're not written down anywhere. Nowhere. They're passed on, you know, as time goes on. So your responsibility when someone gives you a speech to do, you have to learn it backwards and front and be able to deliver it and stand up and deliver it. And so that's one longhouse in the workings of it. That where there's many people at play that do a lot in there, and we watch and we make sure that things are done the way they're supposed to be done. It's very important.
So Janice has a question just about, you know, there's been so much injustice that has happened and continues to happen. And what can we do to help right some of the wrongs that have happened? And, you know, it can seem very overwhelming. And so how can we make an impact here in the region?
Well, in the region, what I would say is what we're looking for is advocates, right? We're looking for allies, people to be, we support your plight here, right? And I'll give you a little bit of context in that. So from in Six Nations, where I'm from and live, right? I don't live in Hamilton, pardon me, but I can go there often. Is a very strict boundary of guideline, right? It's been that way since 1876 when the reserve boundaries were created, and for all purposes, it hasn't changed, right? The population has grown, right? On reserve, there's a good part of 30,000 people there. So we always have issues with housing. We have issues of overcrowding. We have issues of growth. It's hard for us to grow. All these things are hampering to us, right? So what's happened is folks have looked at that and they said, well, development has gone on in our territory, and we either need a piece of that to go on, or we're going to take it back, right? We get the reclamation. So when you look at it and you say to yourself, well, is this just, right? Now, I'll give you a little bit of context. That once upon a time, I worked for the Confederacy Chiefs during a negotiation going back 2005 when there was a reclamation back then, way back then, some land, and they were negotiating with the Confederacy about what we're going to do about this. And they couldn't decide on that piece of land, so they said, let's talk about this other piece of land down here. They took, and it's the Welland Canal. Okay, so the Welland Canal, we all know it, probably all seen it or driven across it. It's there, right? How did it get there? Who made that, right? Like, wow. Well, the federal government made it. And how did they make it? Well, here's how they made it. First, what they did was they sold off what was called the Grand River Navigation Company, right? That was our land that they sold. So they sold that land off, and it was worth millions even in the day, right? So they took that money. And what did they do with that money? Because it was supposed to be put into trust, right? So it's like me saying to you, Jay, I got your money. It's just in trust. Well, every now and again, you're going to want to take a look at that, I imagine. Just for curiosity, right? But I never let you look at it, right? Because I could never hire a lawyer. I couldn't hire a lawyer in this country till 1973, I think. We couldn't hire a lawyer as an Indigenous person. I couldn't walk into court, challenge you for something that was mine. They wouldn't hear me, right? So what they did with that money, right? They took that money, they built the University of Toronto, they built McGill University, and they built the Welland Canal, right? So you find this out that I took your money and I built all these things. You're going, okay, you invested it. This is good, right? And I say, yeah, it's really good, but not for you, because you don't even know how much money is in there, the interest on the interest. So for the Confederacy Chiefs, we sat down, we worked out the math going back, inside of the agreement of the treaty, it says 6% calculated annually, right, on the bulk amount, and then carried forward. They owe us $1.5 trillion, right? 1.5 trillion, and it's a lot of money. And when you look at it, so they give us in transfer payments every year, they give us about $80 million, right? And that sounds like a lot of money, but consider this: that there's a cigarette factory on the territory that sells cigarettes, just not locally, but internationally, right? So there's a fellow down there, his name's Ken Hill, he's passed on since, but his company, GRE, sells every single cigarette that the German army smokes, everyone, right? They sell every cigarette that the Korean army smokes, every single one, right? Every day they have trucks going out the laneway. Every truck is worth like $3.5 million. That's what it's worth going out. The federal government collects about $160 million a year in excise tax from that one exercise, right? And they send 80 back, right? So we look at the inequity in that. We're thinking, these things need to change. These things need to change. So come time now, the local town of Caledonia says, okay, we're going to develop. We're just going to develop out and out. We know we have this power to go occupy, right? So we simply go and sit on the land. And everybody goes crazy every time. Say, what are you doing? You can't do this. Rule of law, all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And every time we point to the federal government and say, go talk to your big brother about this. And, the last time that happened in 2005, the federal government kind of dusted it up, I'll say, right? They give the Confederacy some money for their own development, right? Because they had crushed them once upon a time. They had physically removed them in 1924 and inserted the elected system on the vote of like 55 people voted and inserted that. So the Confederacy Council that had always been in charge was there was a coup d'etat and they're taken out. That left free for that elected council to pave the way for development, because the consultation would just go to the elected officials, and elected officials listened to their master, right? And they would just say, yeah, the Confederacy is looking down there at the Longhouse saying, all right, we're going to draw the line and this is how we're going to do it. And for all purposes, they've shut down development in the town of Caledonia in order to bring this attention to say it's going to require a lot more than just these pittance to solve this problem, right? And what we're looking for is land stewardship, right? This is if it's your land, you want say over it, right? Because the particulars of it is this, that all the medicines we have, the ceremony places we have, right? Come time for development to be decided, none of it's considered, right? None of it's thought of. It's just looking at, we can put 200 houses in there and carry on. So the real boiling point came over when it was found out the elected system had accepted a payment from a developer with the instructions that they were to quell any kind of uprising that we were to do on the land, right? They give them $200,000, okay? So when we're looking at that piece of property, on average, right, there is probably about 250 houses. The average house on that lot is $500,000. Would you take $200,000 for that, right? There's where the beef is. So when we lay these things out, and not, you know, I'll say not everybody can see what I'm talking about. I can appreciate that. Only because colonization has told you the complete opposite for years. They told your dad and your grandpa and all the way back, they don't own the land. They don't own, they have no interest. They have nothing like that. That was all a lie, right? This is what we're presenting, right? And ultimately, we're looking to renew that 2-row that we originally had. With that comes, and this is from you guys, from the Dutch in the day, their contribution to the whole thing was 3 silver rings, right? So 3 silver rings. 1 ring is us, 1 ring is you, and in between is what we share. Those are the things we share. And we would polish that once a year to remind us of that, right? So we need a polishing of that covenant chain again to remind us all what is going on here, what has happened, right? In order that we can move forward in a more peaceful way. And the alternative to that, which I've seen the Crown turn their nose up, is, well, sign back the UAT and sign back, you know, the Welland Canal and sign back McGill University. We'll call it square, right? They don't like it. So that's so allyship. Speaking up, right? You know, when your council, your town council, your city council says, "Hey, we're going to develop this big piece of land," ask yourself, how does this impact on Haudenosaunee land rights, right? And educate yourself on that. So there's a lot of movement in this area where right now, and I'm part of this, where we're starting what's called as a land trust, right? From our point of view, and look at it from our point of view. Okay, so if the government was your creditor, right? Not your creditor, but your funder, that's the person running it. So we watched them for years, right? Watched them do their business. For us, right now, is getting down to the point where we believe it could just collapse, right? It could just collapse. If I owed you that much money and I was about to collapse, you would be looking to put some hooks into me to say, all right, well, let's square you up here. I want to make sure when this falls, I get something out of it. That's the position we're in right there. We're just waiting and positioning ourselves that, you know, the government recognizes it and sees us as an easier go if there are some collapses to partner with us on this going forward.
Sounds like there's a whole lot more to the story than I've heard, that I've been taught. Now, I suspected that, but you've given new thoughts that I had never heard of before. We're at about 8:30, and I have one more question here that I wanted to tie in because it wraps it in well. The question is this from Carrie: would a good place for the church to connect with urban and rural individuals with an Indigenous background, be a local either friendship center or another location? Where would be a good place for us to connect and learn?
The friendship centers are excellent places, right? They have outreach people that just all the time, and they're always looking for volunteers, right? I've in Hamilton here, I volunteered once upon a time in a literacy program, right? I just help folks learn how to read, and it's as simple as that. And inside of that, right, I made connection with people. I got to know them. Maybe they thought this way of me, but they saw. Think we soften when we feel community, right? We soften up, and we're not so rigid towards each other. We can just see each other. And to me, going to there, or even making back association, you're not that far from Six Nations, and you're in the whole catchment area. Coming down and making association. I talk about that Onondaga Longhouse. On the second Saturday of every month, they hold council meetings, right? So the chiefs meet, they talk about the issues that they're going to talk about, but they allow visitors. And if you had something to say, right, we can get you in touch with the secretary. His name's Jock Hill, and he's the secretary. So what the secretary does is he keeps track of every single decision the Confederacy has ever made. And what it looks like, it's a great big long, like a walking stick, right? It's got these little wee pins in it. Some of them are clustered, some have little symbols next to them, but it tells a story about you being there, what you said, what the decision was.
So every second Saturday.
Yep.
And where is this again? At the
Onondaga Longhouse.
Okay.
So quick instructions to get there. If anyone knows, if you come across Chiefswood Bridge in Oswego, turn left on 6th line. You're going to go up and you're going to see Onondaga Road, which is going to be your second road. Turn right. And it's just right up on your right-hand side. You'll see it, this big longhouse. But you make sure that they know you're coming before you come.
I was going to say, yeah.
Surprise! But they welcome delegations all the time, right? That are they want to make reassociation, because there's lots of, I say we had a great relationship with a lot of people for 350, 400 years. Then all of a sudden, boom, it stopped. Well, as time gets more dire, I see that people see that as it's time to reunite that, because they might, just like the original days where they could see how to survive this, we have that same intuition and same knowledge today, right? Of how to survive this. How do you survive to go outside? The world is a dangerous place. It always has been, right? It's just we just have to adapt and learn new things. And if we share, we have an opportunity to learn twice as much in the same time.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you very much, Jim. Really appreciate your time and what you've shared. I may follow up in an email with more. There's so many questions.
Jason has my email. And one day when this all passes, we can go meet, have a coffee, and shoot the breeze live in person. I don't know what that is anymore. I just say it. I don't even know it's a real thing.
That would be great. I want to finish by just saying for us in our tradition, we believe in Creator God as well. We use different language to describe God and things of spirit, our teaching passed on through the Bible, etc. But at the center of all our teaching is Jesus. And for us, Jesus is the one who teaches us about both the need for justice and stewardship and its important role, land stewardship, life stewardship, relational stewardship, but also for healing. So even if some of us, as we were listening, thought the language that you used was different, the resonance between what you were saying and what we believe Jesus is teaching and modeling and accomplishing are the same. So I wonder, I'm just going to finish with a prayer of thanks. You began with a prayer of thanks, and I want to finish with a prayer of thanks. And part of that prayer will be asking for justice and healing. And we believe together, I think, that God knows best what that looks like, and we can learn.
He brought us all here together today, right?
Yeah. Actually, I really appreciated your words about the creator's original instructions. That connected with me because we have our own creation story that speaks about his original instructions, and stewardship is such an important part of that. So, but anyways, I could keep going, and that's not the time. So
Yeah, it's so good. I appreciate it all.
let me pray. Creator God, we do believe that you have imparted to us instructions to give us life, the very good life that you created us for. We have turned this world into the mess that it is through broken promises and covenants, and through anger and violence. And I want to thank you for Jim, and I want to thank you for his sharing his heart, his story, his community's experience, but also their longing for justice and healing. And so we join with Jim and Haudenosaunee community and all the citizens of this country in Turtle Island. We're praying, pleading for justice and healing. And we are looking to you to be our guide and our helper in this, to show us what that looks like best. So thank you for this evening, for what we could learn, and may we continue to listen and learn and grow in love. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Those kind words. I really appreciate that. And thanks again, Jason, for reaching out. He just knows. He knew.
Yeah,
Excellent. Thanks everyone for coming out. We appreciate your being here. And I should add, if you're still here, this is the last one for the season, and we hope to start up in September again or sometime then. And we may be reaching out for your feedback. So stay tuned for an email and let us know what you thought. Anyways, thanks for coming out, and good night.